Hey guys, it's Chris. From climbers stumbling over corpses, hikers left to freeze and die, and tragedy after tragedy, here are horrifying stories about 10 different people abandoned on Everest. Number 10. Left for dead. Mount Everest is one of the most dangerous places on Earth for a person to go. It's cold, it's the world's highest peak, and there isn't much oxygen available when you start to get up high. But even worse than trying to climb the world's most dangerous mountain is being abandoned upon it. Nobody wants to be abandoned really anywhere, never mind near the peak of Everest. But that's exactly what happened to Lincoln Hall. After he and his teammates reached the peak of Everest, they began the treacherous descent. It was at 28,000 feet when Hall's feet refused to move, and he said that he needed to go to sleep. Unbeknownst to him, he was suffering from cerebral edema, which is basically altitude sickness. His brain was swollen and he was sick, and unfortunately the rest of Hall's group went on without him, leaving him in the care of 2 Sherpas. But after 9 hours, the Sherpas were forced to leave Hall behind on the side of the mountain. They literally just abandoned him on the mountain. Less than 60 feet away, and just a few hours before, a German hiker suffered similar issues before he collapsed and died. The next morning, Lincoln Hall was found by a group of friends who were on their way to the summit. He was disoriented, he had frostbite, and he was just sitting on a platform of snow and ice completely out of it. Rather than reach the top, the group of friends sacrificed the $20,000 they'd each paid to make the journey to go down and rescue Lincoln Hall. Thanks to them, Hall escaped the mountain with his life, even after being abandoned. Number 9. Green boots. There have been a lot of people die on Everest, but what a lot of people don't know is that the bodies of the deceased usually remain there on the mountain. The most famous of all the dead bodies strewn through the snow and ice of the deadly Tower of Rock and Stone is Green Boots. Almost everyone trying to reach the top of Everest must pass Green Boots on their way to the summit. So why is this guy called Green Boots? Well, it's because of his extremely bright green boots. He's a very distinct corpse that has yet to be removed since he was left there abandoned in 1996. Green Boots' real name is likely Tse Wang Paljor, or at least it's one of his teammates. Nobody knows the man's identity for sure. Most experts are fairly certain he was a 28-year-old officer with the Indian-Tibetan Border Police who grew up in a village at the base of the Himalayas. In 1996, he was selected to be part of a team that would be the first Indians to reach the very top of Everest from its north side. Unfortunately, almost nobody in the expedition returned. Just one man made it back from the cruelty of the mountain in 1996. And believe it or not, Green Boots and the rest of the expedition abandoned the only survivor of the mission. Most of the group pushed on, even through worsening weather, thus abandoning Harbhajan Singh on the side of the mountain. Even though the rest of the group reached the summit, they all died afterward in a horrible blizzard. The guy they abandoned was the only one who made it to safety. And Tse Wang, aka Green Boots, is still on the mountain all these years later. Number 8. Too many climbers. Get this, there are too many people climbing Mount Everest. 2019 turned into one of the deadliest years in the mountain's history, all because of dangerous overcrowding with climbers that don't have the necessary experience. There are so many people climbing Mount Everest that on a clear day during peak season, there's actually a lineup of people trying to reach the top, which resulted in 11 people dying in the 2019 season. It was the highest number of deaths since 2015. Because of all the people wishing to stand at the top of the world, some of them end up dying on the way. According to PBS, climbers in 2019 were forced to step over the bodies of abandoned climbers on their way to the top. People literally run out of oxygen, die just before the summit, and other tourists are forced to step over their abandoned corpses. Mount Everest has turned into an absolute nightmare of a place. Do you know of anyone who has successfully scaled Mount Everest or any other world-class peaks? Do they have some incredible stories, or maybe you have some? Tell me about your personal experiences or theirs with Everest in the comments section below. Then be sure to subscribe to World List if you haven't already for more incredible videos just like this one. Number 7. George Mallory. George Mallory died on the north face of Mount Everest on June 8, 1924. He was a British mountaineer who was leading one of the first ever expeditions to the top of the mountain when he disappeared and was subsequently abandoned. Back in the 1920s, George Mallory was one of the most famous disappearances in the world. This guy had served during World War I, and he was a teacher in England, and he had even been to the mountain before. It was his third expedition in 1924 when Mallory went missing. Him and another hiker were never seen from again after trying to reach the summit from their last camp at 26,800 feet. The rest of the climbers had no choice but to descend the mountain without both men. The fate of the climbers was then debated for nearly 80 years. An axe belonging to one of the men was found at 27,700 feet. Then an oxygen canister from the 1920s was discovered in 1991 on the mountain. In 1999, George Mallory's body was finally discovered at 26,760 feet. It was determined that he had died from a fall, and it's unclear whether he had reached the peak before tumbling to his death. But in any case, he was one of the first famous deaths on Everest, and his body is still on the mountain even today. Number 6. David Sharp. David Sharp froze to death alongside Green Boots, another famous death on Everest back in 2006. His death was extremely tragic, and the disturbing situation surrounding his demise sparked quite a bit of controversy over the years. This is because at least 40 climbers passed David Sharp's body on their way either up or down Everest. But they didn't pass a dead man, they passed David Sharp as he lay dying. 40 people looked at him and decided it wasn't even worth to check and see if he was alive, and they left him abandoned inside the cave near another corpse. Unfortunately, even if someone had noticed David dying, they probably couldn't have saved him. This was in the death zone, about 26,000 feet, and it's believed that nobody can be rescued beyond that point when stricken by altitude sickness and frostbite. His body was finally pulled out of the cave by a group of climbers who discovered him, but by then there was nothing that could be done. Like many others, David's body is still half buried beneath the snow on the mountain he failed to climb. Number 5. Seamus Lawless. Seamus Lawless was an Irish climber who fell to his death thanks to a gust of wind near the top of Mount Everest. He wasn't exactly abandoned, but his story is so bizarre that you really do need to hear it. Not only did Seamus get blown off Mount Everest, but it happened after he had unclipped from a safety harness and decided to urinate off the side of the mountain. According to the Irish Post, this happened while Seamus was descending from the summit of Mount Everest, just 600 feet from his camp. Nobody saw Seamus die, and his friends searched for him until it got dark, but unfortunately, he has been presumed dead. It just goes to show that even trying to use the bathroom on the deadliest mountain in the world can also lead to disaster. Number 4. Sherpa deaths. A lot of people assume that all the deaths on Everest come from climbers, but in fact, about 1/3 of all Everest deaths are Sherpas. According to NPR, the Sherpas who guide foreigners to the top of the mountain carry the food and the tents, and they do all the hard work. And they're usually the ones that get abandoned on the mountain to die. Out of over 300 people who've died on Everest, about 100 of them have been Sherpas. 7 Sherpas died on the first summit attempt back in 1922, while an avalanche took 16 of them in 2014. Sherpas climb up and down Mount Everest constantly, and almost every Sherpa has had a friend they've been forced to abandon on the mountain because of an unfortunate act of nature. When someone is beyond the saving point, there's no choice but to leave them behind in the snow. That's the cold, hard truth of Everest. Number 3 is Sleeping Beauty. One of the most famous deaths to ever occur on Mount Everest was a woman named Frances Arsentiev, popularly known as Sleeping Beauty. She perished on the mountain while trying to ascend to the summit in 1998. There are no pictures available of her position on Everest, but she's still one of the most popular figures who ever died on the mountain. It all happened on May 22, 1998, after she became the first American woman to ever reach the summit of Everest without needing supplemental oxygen. But it's the way Frances reached the top that made her famous. She'd been climbing the mountain with her husband when they reached Camp 6 and got stuck. They were at 28,000 feet and almost at the top. The weather prevented them from reaching the summit or from going down, causing them to stay 3 nights in the dead zone. After spending so much time in the most dangerous place on the mountain, they finally decided to go back to the main base camp. But Frances and her husband got separated. Her husband reached the camp only to realize that his wife had not returned. She was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until the next day that a team of climbers found her on the peak. She was nearly unconscious, badly frostbitten, and basically paralyzed. The team helped her down as far as they could, but were forced to abandon her because they were running out of oxygen. News eventually reached her husband, and he was able to find her, but she was too far gone. She ended up going to sleep in the cold and never waking up again. As for her husband, well, he fell to his death while trying to save Francine's life, and his body was found a year later. She's now known as Sleeping Beauty because when she was first discovered, her skin was so white and waxy that she looked like the legendary fairy tale character. Number 2. Body removal. In 2004, 3 climbers from Korea perished while trying to climb Mount Everest. As you know by now, getting bodies off the mountain is no easy feat. Most bodies are left abandoned on the mountain and never removed. But after the 3 Korean climbers died, there was a massive outcry over the lack of effort to not only save their lives, but to preserve their bodies. In 2005, 14 Koreans went on an expedition to Mount Everest to bring the bodies back down the mountain. But it was an absolute disaster. Only 1 body was found, still clipped to the rescue line at 28,700 feet. After many hours of extreme effort, the team of 14 people were only able to move the dead body 500 feet. They had to give up. The team covered the body with rocks, conducted a small ceremony, then went back down the mountain without bringing any bodies with them. This just goes to show how absolutely nightmarish it is to try and take anything off Mount Everest. It's very likely that the bodies of the dead will continue to amass as more and more people try to make the climb. Number 1. Not the deadliest. After hearing all these horror stories, you probably think Mount Everest is the most dangerous mountain on Earth. But according to Business Insider, it's only the 10th most dangerous. There are far more frightening mountains a person can climb, and many of them have significantly higher fatality rates. For example, K2, which is the second tallest mountain in the world, is even more perilous. It's only 778 feet shorter than Everest, and yet between 1906 and 2008, only 264 people have reached its peak. Out of those brave climbers, 24 of them died coming back down. The mountain has a fatality rate of 29%. In comparison, out of the 3,648 climbers who have reached the peak of Mount Everest, only 56 of them didn't make it down. NASA reported in 2012 that Everest only has a fatality rate of 4%. In 2008, a group of 25 mountain climbers tried to reach the summit of K2. During that attempt, Insider magazine reported that 11 climbers from 7 different countries died within just 24 hours and were abandoned on the mountain. That's how savage trying to climb K2 really is. So, what about you? Would you ever risk your life to climb this horrifying mountain? Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to hit that subscribe button before you leave. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon for another fantastic video.